Do it.
We good? All right, guys.
Sorry.
We have the professor talking this afternoon. If you don't know why he's Professor Leos, you're about to find out. I don't know what he's talking about because when I talked to him yesterday, he didn't know what he's talking about. But it's going to be good, and he's going to use big words probably. So just bear with it. And he's a brother I never had, so make fun of him.
He's the brother you never wanted.
Exactly, and none of you guys are.
Hello, everyone. Thank you for coming. I am Leos Mike. My mother named me Michael. I grew up in Massachusetts, moved to New Hampshire about 14, 15 years ago. Got a small homestead. A couple past lives ago, I worked retail. I've done work in construction. I've done all kinds of different things. Worked in finance for a little while. Studied a bunch of permaculture. Worked with Jeff Lawton for a little while. Been running my homeschool since about the same time the children thing started. So that's, call it 17 years. And always knew that I was looking for something to do it different, right? When I found out that permaculture existed, that was actually really a relief because it turns out somebody else had already looked at some of the problems that I had seen and was already looking at crafting solutions to some of the problems that I had seen. So instead of having to reinvent the wheel, my wife Kim and I were able to actually start following a template. And that actually was really, really good. So we do an awful lot of that in our lives. Alan was joking before that he really only clears his throat in an hour. Right? This is why they don't let me do the introduce yourself in 5 minutes thing anymore, because you're going to be locked in for probably an hour at least. That's why I'm going to introduce a bunch of that here before we actually get into my main topic. Who can tell me what this is as I stand in front of it?
Whiteboard.
It is a whiteboard.
Layout of your property.
He only knows that because he's been there. But we'll give you a real general look. This is 5.5 acres in southern New Hampshire. Zone 5B, when we moved in, they may have actually upgraded us to 6A at this point. I can't remember. I don't always check it out. We have generally all of this. Much faster to list it out what I don't have than what I actually do. The turkeys and broiler chickens are generally seasonal. We just added bees back for the first time in 5 or 6 years. The rabbit population is primarily being managed by my daughter. We tractor them around in different areas. They maintain paths between the gardens, and they maintain any of the areas that are actually lawn so that we don't have to mow them. Now, any places that do get up and mown, we actually use that grass and a bunch of other places in our system. The ducks, we have a couple different types of ducks, runner ducks, muscovy ducks, pretty much any variety that you've heard of that people have been trying around. We have tried them on our property. The geese is an assorted grab bag flock at this point. We tried Plymouth geese at one point. They were actually a really, really good species, but 2 years back at this point, we said, let's actually up the number of geese. We like goose eggs. Goose eggs are delicious. So we bought a whole bunch of them, and they were an assorted bunch. There's at least one Chinese. There's a whole bunch of African. There's a few that are probably Toulouse. And the original couple of pilgrim geese that we had are all part of that flock. There are like 35 to 40 eggs, goose eggs, sitting on the counter at home right now because this is the season for that. But one of them, and if I can figure out which one, I'm going to get a bunch more. One of them laid pretty much 80% of last year, which is not standard for a goose. Usually you get a big flux in the spring, and you don't have that sort of sustained production. That was a nifty thing to learn. Now, I just have to figure out which one it is. We've had American guinea hog pigs for quite some time. I thought that was a really, really, really good idea. They're smaller. They're a little bit easier to handle. They are a lard pig, so they're a little bit more fatty. But if you are actually doing anything else with leaner meat, hunting venison, raising rabbits, raising chickens or other poultry, right? You want to make some sausage, you bring some of that extra fat back, and you use that to make that a much more complete meal. So they are an excellent homestead-style pig. 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. There are 8 of those. They hide in a little depression back here. They're actually probably sealing up what is otherwise sand and gravel soil, and at some point in time, this will start to hold more water than it weeps. In the meantime, it's also a pretty good sink for nutrient and other things. These are not contour lines per se, but the reason I've got them drawn on here, these dotted lines, is because they do mark fairly substantial demarcation points in the property. This is almost all one level before it sort of drops off on either side. So this is below the level of the road, and there's a sort of a drainage creek that comes over this way to a swampy area, right? And there's an actual brook that runs from the other side, a couple houses over, down this way. And the whole thing sheds off to the southeast into a impoundment area created by the Army Corps of Engineers about a mile or so away. So we've got a whole bunch of surface water, but this area is 25, 30 feet higher above the rest. All of it sand, gravel, pretty much nutrient free, pretty much unable to retain that nutrient. Biochar features pretty heavily in that, and a lot of nutrient cycling. There's a whole bunch of activity happening down here with the chickens who have their run over this area, but the poultry are all here. And the goats, the steer, any of the other moving ruminants, the moving livestock, sort of centers around this semi-permanent set of panel and T-post enclosures. So we'll take what's happening down here in terms of bedding and manure and that sort of thing from the chickens and from those livestock, and that ends up on the higher area, processed for compost into the gardens, and that's what all these green boxes are. By the way, this is not to scale. I'm not a cartographer on the side. These run in this direction because the primary contour is actually shedding this way. This is if I call it a swale, it probably is more of a micro swale, but it's a couple of feet wide, couple of feet deep, and there's trees and other perennials planted all around here. A little square box there is where the bees hide. They've got really good southern and southeastern exposure during this the morning, and in the afternoon and evening, there's a bunch of trees through here, so they get pretty good shade. This area goes the other direction because this section slopes downhill and into it. And we've got a perennial bed through here, a perennial bed through here. And all of the garlic I talk about and all of the rest of our vegetable production slides around in different places in all of these double reach beds. They're not raised beds. We put them right on the ground, and we tend to add a bunch of material as we go. Every once in a while, you might have to come through and edge them. So we'll cut the grass back, put the material that was moving into the paths back on top of the bed, and that's just like amending it with anything else. This section in the front, there's some other perennials, grapes, mulberries over here. And this section is pretty much entirely devoted to my wife and daughter's flowers and other stuff. You know, every once in a while, they'll be like, we bought another pretty plant. And I'll be like, I'm going to burn it with gasoline. It should be something productive. No, I joke because she actually does sell bouquets and she makes a fair number of them every year. Just some of that through sort of a subscription style thing, like a spring subscription. You get 5 or 10 bouquets. You pay entire time, and she'll take on several people like that for that period, move on to the next one, move on. So she's probably going to be ramping that up over time, which means she's going to want more area for that. And I don't know where I'm going to find it. Everything else is full. All of that said, that's the homestead when I'm talking about it. And that's not what we're here for. We're here to talk about making stuff. Who here knows how to make something? It's kind of a trick question. What do you make?
Children.
What else? Medicine's good.
Sourdough bread.
I'm just going to give you bread.
Bread, man.
What else?
Hats.
Hats are good.
Superior bio and body fat.
I'm going to leave off the marketing.
It's true though.
What kind of hats?
Knitted.
You don't prefer crochet?
Oh hell no. I need 2 things in my hands. Need everything.
I've done both. I find they have their pros and their cons, but it's an excellent one. Anything else?
Butter. Tallow.
Beef products, beef and dairy. I'm going to put them both under food. Unfortunately, I really think food doesn't necessarily apply, but it is a productive thing.
I make people's lives easier.
You don't get to do it anymore. Who else likes to spend their time creating things? What are you making?
Buildings.
Buildings is good.
Buildings.
Outbuilding, yeah.
A mess.
I am a mess, so I totally understand that.
3D prints.
3D prints is good. Soap is good. Yeah.
Music.
Somebody else is raising hands.
You got to raise your hand, honey.
Videos, DMS, mixes, robot dolls.
That's good. Well, you have a whole bunch. They're all valid.
Compost.
Compost is good. I love compost.
Garden.
Gardens are excellent. Although, are you making them? Or are the
Edible.
gardens making
Edible.
them? Yeah, that's true. It's edible. One of the reasons I say, I'm kidding, of course. I make a ton of food. I love to eat, as may be evident. One of the reasons I say food doesn't necessarily count is because what food makes is dishes. So it's a very temporary thing. Now, as a fulfilling activity, I think it's excellent. I'm going to steer more towards the at least semi-permanent. Somebody else had a hand up.
Wood,
Wood? You make wood?
well, I cut it down,
So would that be firewood? Are you doing more than just firewood?
using it for planters, raised planters, fencing, etc.
So
Tables.
lumber or timber?
Correct.
Excellent. That's actually a very, very good one.
I make egg baskets
Mhm.
out of colored eggs that I breed. I breed like over 20 different colors of eggs, like
So-
purple and pink and blue and green and olive.
So the basket is made out of the eggs?
No, it's an antique chicken egg basket.
Uh-huh.
And then I take the eggs and I preserve the eggshells. And then I stabilize them and I put them in a basket so it's a piece of art. So people can have a pretty egg basket that won't rot.
Cool. I don't think I've ever heard anybody say something like that before.
Apple cider vinegar and then reserving the batch to make mellow mel. So mead and apple cider vinegar. So
Yes. So the potent potables, those are also excellent things to produce. Why? Why do we make things? Cool is good.
We like the thing.
Unique, beautiful is good. Useful, productive is good. Keep your head warm is good.
I do it to use.
To end the nihilistic suffering. Thank you, Mr. Mills.
I do it specifically, started it to use the other side of my brain from construction and engineering.
I like that. I like that a lot. I cannot regulate a whole bunch of the mess that goes on in this space without having something tangible to focus on and to see when it is done. I make a lot of things. Kids and I have been blacksmithing for a couple of years now. We've also started going to a makerspace. If you've never checked out a makerspace, I suggest you do. It is the answer to your toolbox fallacy. Pretty much, period, stop. But, wood turning, learning about wood grain, learning about what the growth habits of the tree becomes in terms of some of those productive elements, learning how to use some of the smaller elements of wood and sticks and branches and reeds in basketry and other things. If it is something like that, my brain wants to know how it works. I want to know how it goes together. Why does that weave work that way? Why does that piece need to go there and not this other piece that isn't as flexible? It's absolutely important for me. And I'm extrapolating onto the rest of you, I'm sorry. But most people feel good when they have finished something that they worked on and they can see the end result of that process. Now, you also see sometimes the flip side to that. Why don't you do more of that? Oh, it's hard. It didn't work out.
I have a real job.
I have a real job. Would you believe when I worked in Cube World, I used to knit phone calls. Hated that. First, because it was me. Why is a guy knitting at work? Second, because it made me happier, and I think that's really bothered them. But this drive becomes very easy to forget, right? You got to keep all of them children alive and fed, right? You got bills. We've got reasons, like our lives and our lifestyle puts us on the treadmill to make sure that we are making the money necessary to live our life. All of these things are stressful, right? Even in a community like this, right? I love you all to death, right? But if I told you to spend 100 hours making that hat, doesn't matter how much you like it, for me to charge enough money to sell that hat, it doesn't really work. But the value of that hat isn't necessarily that I can make 100 of them or sell a dozen of them. Because when I did it, it was actually doing something very different for me, right? And that's something I think everybody should think about. It's not just about what did you do for yourself today. Sometimes that's a bubble bath, candles, good glass of wine, some nice mead, right? Sometimes it is actually working, getting some time in the shop, right? But if everything you are doing is primarily about meeting those needs, paying those bills, getting through the day, right? What can you do today that will actually make you happier, right? And sometimes it is something as simple as knitting a hat, right? Producing something at the end of the day, even if it's just for a couple of minutes. You guys remember 75 Hard?
Yeah.
Okay. One of the tenets of 75 Hard was that you could not skip a day, right? Saying to you, don't skip a day. 10, 15 minutes, right? Not reading in this case, although that's an excellent way to actually do some stuff for yourself on the daily, right? But crafting, whatever it is, if it has to be an hour because of the nature of the project, 15 minutes just doesn't work for you to set up all your paints and actually go Picasso, that's fine. But really do think about that. Intentionally schedule the acts of creation that reward your brain for being human. Right? Now, for some people, right, the garden, the food production, all the stuff that I said, that doesn't count. It goes away. That still counts. If that's what really does it for you, don't let me poo-pooing it right now be a criticism of any kind. I cook a lot and I grow a lot to do that. And that is very rewarding. But do think about some of those other things too. Is it the cooking that's keeping you from painting, knitting, weaving, basket weaving, creating children? Everybody's got a talent. Is that what's going to keep you away? Is that something that, needs a little bit more focus? Now, I mentioned before, some people start, they express an interest, right? Well, I would do that, but it's not really working out. What do you think is stopping that from improving?
If they really like it, they haven't committed enough time to make it easier. They're I think people give up.
You've got the core of it there. Can anybody add to that?
I don't add to the space. I'm a crafter, but I've been living in a school bus and lived outside the rest of the space, so I didn't have space to do my work.
Yeah.
And leave it for a little bit and come back to it.
Sometimes you have to modify your activity so that it fits. Now that's one where
Different things I make
precisely
with clay.
you found a way to make it work, and that's important too. That is a good one. The root of improvement, right, is iteration. That's a big word. Letty warned you. Repetition, right? If you iterate the cycle, right, you're doing it again. Now, some things are big loops, right? You start looking at changes at this scale, right? The water cycle, right? That can be decades, right? Some of these soil and geological cycles, the nutrient cycles, right? You're looking at seasonal, right? Some of them annual. There are some changes that when you say, well, this year, the broiler chickens, we're gonna do it different next year. That's an annual cycle. It takes a long time from our finite human attention spans to actually iterate that process. Doesn't mean you can't change things in stream, right? There's absolutely applications where like a little bit of tweaking while you're on the horse may actually be the right way to get it done. But every single piece of that larger cycle can be broken down. You take a look at the annual cycle with the chickens, right? It's about, for Cornish cross, we won't get into the husbandry or the rest of it. We won't talk too much about the animal. But let's say you've got 8 weeks, right? There's a period of brooding, right? You can think about and change and iterate that brooding cycle much faster than the entire cycle of chickens, right? Once they get out of the brooder, right? Each day is also a cycle, especially if you're doing something with daily chores, right? How does that iteration feel? When you're looking at your day-to-day, right? I may not be able to cycle that annual chicken cycle until next year, but I didn't like the way today went. I can change how tomorrow's cycle is going to go. And that means I get basically 2 weeks of brooder refinement iteration, if we count one day at a time. Every day I could do something a little bit different until I've got it dialed in for about 2 weeks. And then I've got 6 weeks of moving them through. But Leos, somebody who's raised broilers, says they're completely different in week 8 than they are in week 3. That's okay. You still have the opportunity to look at that, especially if you've got a couple years under your belt, because every year you've done this, you've learned something about it. This is true of hats, right? Every row, if you're knitting, every stitch, if you're crocheting, that's a smaller loop. Eventually you get to a minutia. You're dealing with pixels on the big screen of your life, right? You eventually get so small, maybe it doesn't matter, right? But that's also where you can dial things in. If you're too focused on the minutia, you can scale back. You can actually zoom out. You can put more of that in front of you, and you can pick the size that is manageable. If the project is too big, or if the time scale is just too intense, you can scale it down. You find the portion, and some days it might be different, right? If you're having a day where you just can't even, right? The loop that you need to be looking at that will give you the most benefit won't be the same size as it might be on another day. But you still shouldn't skip a day, right? You got to think about that reason, why are you doing it? Reason d'etre. Oh, I do not French. I'm sorry. I shouldn't have done that. If you want to improve in something so that you can be proud of it, show it off, if it's not quite there yet, don't quit, right? Look at where your opportunity for improvement lies and iterate that cycle, right? To go back to the chickens, right? If you're losing birds in the brooding phase, you need to fix that problem. If you're losing birds at the end of your 8-week period, you've got to fix that problem, right? If you're really good at starting your projects, but not finishing them, what's the disconnect? You can actually do a whole bunch of starts and not finish them, and then practice finishing them back to back, right? To use the hat example, right? You might get them halfway done. And then it switches to a section of the pattern that's a little bit more complex, that you struggle with a little bit more, right? And you actually create the circumstances where the area you need to target for improvement can be practiced without separating it across the longer time scale, right? My homestead, we do 1 run of chickens. There have been years that we do 2, right? If I needed to, I could do a fraction of the number of chickens, and I could probably stretch it out to 6 or 8 discrete cycles between spring and fall, just to iterate the process. Is it a little bit more work? Probably. But in this example, right, I can have 1 shot to review the thing and improve it. Or I can, just by design, right, just by some choices in timing and implementation, turn that into a circumstance where I can have, let's say, 8 opportunities to do the same thing. Now, that also sets you up to have 8 different chores on a given day, because you're dealing with this age bracket, this age bracket, this age bracket, et cetera, right? Maybe a better example across time would be like a succession of lettuce, right? If I'm planting this patch week 1, this patch week 2, this patch week 3, right? I can have lettuce in every stage of growth, and when patch 1 is ready to be removed, right? Reseed and start over. You can have a continuous loop of lettuce production and refinement just because you decided to set up the system in such a way that it made it possible for you to do. But if we're focusing on the things that make you happy, the skills that you want to develop, right? Don't be afraid of taking the extra time to set aside that space, even if it's only for the purposes of basic. Admit to, it's not how much you it is, for one thing. I promise you it is. Whatever progress you are making, it's already good enough. But when you doubt yourself on that, figure out what needs to be fixed and focus on it. Create the opportunity that you need in order to actually do the work. Look at the process repeatedly and align it, right? And by doing those things, you will increase your skills, you'll increase your outputs, you'll increase your results, right? It should turn into additional happiness because you're actually iterating that happiness process along the way. And when, let's say you're done with hats, right? You can move on to something else. Sweaters. Sweaters are hard.
They are.
Now you're getting into body shape and other blocking. I've never tackled one of those. I may never. I've got too many other interests. People say they get bored. Has anybody here ever been bored?
No.
Right? In this crowd, I'm not surprised, right? I've got too many things to do to be bored. When people say they have nothing to do, I can't understand them, right? I will spend the rest of my life chasing one silly thing after another, probably, and I say silly in a disparaging way. They're really not. If I'm interested in them, that's good enough, right? But if you said, well, Leos, you've got all the time in the world, what are you going to do? It's like, I don't know, there's a long list, right? There's a long list. And some of it's just to experience it, right? And then say, you know what, that's not for me. That's okay. It's okay. And if it's okay for me, it's okay for you. With all that said, do you want me to go into more detail on any of this? Any of my systems on the homestead, the farm?
Sure. Bees.
I didn't really mention the bees. So up here, behind the swale, behind the gardens, right, is where we put our bee box. The primary reason for that is because of that early morning sun exposure. Now, in the height of summer, the sun actually comes up over here, and it goes all the way around, and it sets somewhat north of us over there. One of the reasons that this location is the one that we chose is because while there is a lot, this entire area almost is covered in trees. There's a whole section of really big pine trees through here. There's an oak tree that's too big to put your arms around over here. A lot of this area, I also meant to mention that my 5.5 acre parcel sort of butts up against this sort of swampy area, and it's conservation land. So there's an area back here of lots of really, really old growth trees. So there's a lot of shade. There's a lot of dappled shade. There's a lot of areas where, especially at certain times of the year, different parts of the garden have extra shade. But this is one of the best spots to make sure that they get that early morning wake up call, right? And it's like, okay, everybody up, Adam, get to work. And in the afternoon, where things are possibly getting a little bit more intense, you got a really, really hot day, the shade that's being provided by the trees that are all over here really takes the edge off of them. We have attempted to keep bees for probably for the first time was probably around 10 years ago. Got a bunch of bee furniture, had a couple of hives side by side, really tried to get into it. I'm apparently not a very good beekeeper.
You're a bee haver, not a keeper.
In many ways, I am a bee haver, Jake, but not for lack of trying. Now, my primary issue, at least with keeping bees, was that the overwintering, right, seems to be a special kind of secret sauce. There are people around me who seem to manage it, but when I talk to them about it, they aren't doing anything I wasn't doing. So if I ever crack the code, I'll definitely let you know what I was screwing up to begin with. That's just it, right? We're doing the things that are recommended, right? We're putting them in the right place. We're leaving them with the right stock, with the right amount of supply, right? That sort of thing. But there was one year where they made it all the way through the winter, and then in the spring, gave up. Very frustrating that year.
You said you tried to put them in the right place. If you tried putting them in Tennessee as opposed to New Hampshire. Just saying.
Well, you were here when Nicole had bees. Those were spicy bees. Those were very spicy bees. So I don't know if I want the Tennessee barbecue bees. But that's not a terrible idea. With that said, it's not necessarily about troubleshooting. It's more about just the story of the example. We had them for quite some time. We bought different varieties to try and troubleshoot that problem. We've tried different process, things. We skipped Apistan this year. We didn't treat for this that year, right? That sort of thing. And we've tried to iterate the process quite a bit. They can be pretty bad. I mean, it's about as bad as everywhere else. I understand. There's probably places that are a little worse. But right? There's no place that is no place that appears to be immune to that particular problem, that parasite. With that said, some hives on my property? And I said, yeah, sure. We cleaned out some furniture, put them back up here. My wife's really happy about it because she loves to see the extra pollinators. But in the conversation about pollinators, it's always a good time because there's so many wild pollinators around when you start to notice them. Like, well, that's a fly. Even though it's black and yellow, that one's a fly and it's a pollinator, and that one's a wasp and it's a pollinator too. And we have lots of conversations about that. But yeah, we're back in it for now, and maybe next year I'll tell you that we've split them and we're actually doing a couple. But we'll see. Yeah, fingers crossed. We'll see what happens with that. Yes?
Is there anything you haven't done that you want to do?
Oh, dear God. There are lots of things.
Top 3?
Oh, that's tough.
What are you doing next year?
I'll be here. At least I hope to be. If I'm not here, I hope you all attend my funeral.
So you have one there that you run, you keep a steer on your property. How do you work that into your footprint with all the other things? Do you incorporate it with your goats, or how do you manage the grazing, feeding of that animal?
These are size 10.5. So I will need to stomp around quite a bit to fit the steer into that footprint. Does that answer? No? Okay. Well, there's a story there too. There's always a story. This is why I told you I
He's a professor.
can't stop talking. And they won't let me do my story in 5 minutes anymore. You ever hear the phrase, free cow ain't free? Yeah. The reason a free cow isn't free is because if you get a little baby cow, you have to feed it something. And if you do not have a cow to feed your little bovine, beautiful animal, you will be buying milk. If you are buying milk, it's like if you give a mouse a cookie. If you have been given a cow, you're going to buy a bunch of milk. You're going to feed it a gallon of milk every day, probably more than that if you want it to grow as quickly as possible. Of course, you want to wean it as quickly as possible as well. Get it off of the milk, because going to the grocery store to buy a bunch of milk or having a hookup who's willing to give you milk 5 gallons at a time from a local source gets expensive very, very quickly. It's a good thing hamburgers taste good. I was given a bull calf July of last year, June last year, July, I think, as a thank you for some stuff that I did. Pick Your Own Blueberry Farm across town. They did their 50th annual opening, and they wanted to do a pig roast, and she had never done a pig roast before. So after butchering the pig, because, when you have animals, you learn to butcher a lot of different things. After butchering an animal for her and running a class on butchering another pig for her, we did the pig roast, and I helped her do the pig roast. And when that was all said and done, she said, I bought you a cow. I said, thank you, Lori. I used to say, it's easier to list the things I don't have on my property. And the first one on the list of things I didn't have was a cow. Thank you for solving that problem for me. But we decided to learn. One of the dogs, the cats, the children, the wife, they're not on the list. But I do have 2 kids. My son is 17. My daughter is 15. My wife is a little more than a week older than me, and I never let her forget it. But we were game for the challenge. So we brought home the bull calf, and he got bigger. And I said, I really would like to get him off of this milk. And we worked to wean him, and that seemed to work okay. And last I heard, he's still out there, and he's getting quite sizable now. But you want to know how he fits in with everybody else. The semi-permanent pens that are down here, we can usually put the goats as we need to divide them, right? I didn't talk about the San Clemente Island goats very much. Those were also free. You'll notice there's a pattern. Can't say no to a free animal. They're very, very hardy. They're very, very interesting, but they are goats. What's the problem with goats? They're butt heads. I heard somebody. Yeah. Well, turkeys are worse. When it comes to things that are actively trying to prevent you from getting them to the age of maturity, turkeys are probably worse. But, everything you've heard about goats is probably true. And they are a lot of work. And we've done different things. We've tethered them. We've kept them in electric pens. We've done a shift or a rotation. Now, a lot of this area, talking about all those big trees, a lot of this area had sort of scrubby regrowth through it as well. Like at some point, somebody had been brush hogging it and then stopped. So we've reclaimed a fair bit of that, and the goats have helped quite a bit with that because we're not actually mechanically going through. But what that means, right? Because, okay, so in New Hampshire, we have this thing. I don't know if you guys have it. It's called winter.
I know what that is.
I know you know what that is, right? And during the wintertime, right, all of the nifty paddock shifty type things where you can move your animals around and distribute their lovely gifts and, make sure that their burden on the land is lower, they kind of get put on hold. Goats will not move in 6 feet of snow happily. I don't move through 6 feet of snow happily, but there are times of our winter where it's very likely that we've had several different snow events. And while the driveway may have been cleared, so it's only a foot or two over there, there's sections of the back of my yard that are quite deep. We have snowshoes for this reason. We still almost never use them. It's no fun. It's really not. But during that period of time, you got to have something to do. And that's actually where this area comes in. A lot of time they spend divided up as necessary. The bucks have to go over here. The does have to go over here. If I put them together in November, I will probably have kids hitting the ground, in April or May. Right. And they can stay together after that, but then you've got the bucks beating up on the baby. So then generally you've got to separate the bucks out again at some point. So there's always a couple of different animals in a couple of different places. But this is the beginning of that. So you have goats in several of these. It was not particularly difficult when the steer came in to say, like, okay, especially during the summer, the goats weren't in there. The goats were all out on tether and in other arrangements, pens, paddocks, moving around with the brush. So the steer actually took a place in there. All right. So he actually had a little pen to himself. And now, how many of you have kept a cow? I know you have, right? Sherry, okay. Cows, they're like solitary creatures, right? Like tigers. Tigers, they live by themselves forever. They're happy. They never see each other except to seek a mate, right? Cows are like that, right? No. Cows love company. Cows love company. So one of the things I was told by I don't think it was you, somebody else, probably Ford, actually, said, oh no, now you got to get like 3 more because you don't want them to be alone. I said, I believe you. I don't know anything about keeping cows, or in this case, a steer, bovine creatures. But that's okay. I think we'll be all right. I'm not buying another 2 this year. Now, because there's multiple paddocks in this area, and it's not even 4. There's a couple more than that in a couple of other locations as well. It's easy to put them up, but if I don't have to take them down, I'll leave them up. The goats could bounce around. So when I had baby kids from that year, I could put those right next to the cow and they'd play through the fence. And I'd bring the dogs down because we have 3 dogs of our own. Only one of them's really mine. 2 of them came from a friend. Allegedly, he's coming to get them back. It's been a year. We'll see what happens. And then there's another friend that likes to drop his off every day when he goes to Boston for work. So we watch his bird dog, and they all play. They'll go down and play with the cow. I did not get good video, actually, but there are some lovely moments that I will cherish until my Alzheimer's takes them away, of that dog and that cow just nose to nose, ready to dance. It was wild. I hope you all get a chance to see something like it someday. It seems like you have another question.
Well, no.
Thank you for your contribution, John.
That's a great question.
Do you actually put the cow in with the goats in winter?
No, they were separate.
Okay.
We had any of you guys kept a guinea fowl?
My neighbors have them.
They sound like car alarms.
Yeah, they're crazy.
I hate them.
Cartoon birds.
They look like Gizmo from Saw. Do you want to play a game? Right?
Yeah.
That's what I called them. I called them Jigsaw. You want to know how I ended up with a guinea fowl?
Was it free?
It was free. Somebody else didn't want it. My wife said, actually, it was 3. I think it was 3 of them to begin with. But something took mine out. Can you take the rest of them? Sure.
You do know that no is a complete sentence, right?
How much for you to explain this to my wife? I don't know if I can afford the number of hours it may require. We'll talk. So we ended up with a guinea fowl. Jigsaw was great, except for when he was talking, which was almost all the time. You would watch him go over the fence and try to convince the chickens to follow him because he really wanted a harem, even if they weren't his species. Okay. He decided to recruit the steer. At that point, he may not have been a steer. I forget. The electric Cheerios that you use to ban them are an experience, let me tell you. We needed to do it anyway because I weathered a bunch of those kids as well, but that was a different story. Jigsaw went into the pen with Biggie because that's what my wife named him. The cow's name is Biggie, and he is huge. He's not even a big beef breed. He's like a dairy cross or something like that, but he's the biggest animal I've ever had. It's a good thing he's a sweetheart. But, yeah. Jigsaw went to recruit the steer. Jigsaw was found having failed in that activity inside a pen with the steer. I don't know who played harder, but Biggie won. So we can go in. I go in. He loves the dogs. I've never put the dogs in there with him. All right, we're keeping the fence in between. One of the projects that needs to actually happen when I get home is to modify the pen, truly train him to an electric line, and with the rest of the stuff that's going to be happening as the spring season progresses, put him out in other areas where it'll be a little bit easier for some of the other animals to interact with him if he wants to.
I will add this, like as far as that goes, mixing the steer with the goats. Actually, I've had them work very well as their own little herd, and they get along great as long as you don't have too many goats. But don't mixing them in the winter can be bad because of the way that steers shit.
Yeah.
And it will destroy the hooves on your goats.
Yeah.
So
I have heard, your testimony is good, and I know you're doing it. You've sent me pictures. I've also heard from other people I trust less that you can have issues. There were people who told me that I needed to be worried for the goats because the steer would kick the crap out of the goats. I've had people who tell me I had to be worried about the steer because the goats, especially the adult males and females, were going to kick the crap out of the steer. I don't know. Haven't done it. Have kept them separate. Now, I do believe that, pending a conversation with my wife that may involve the word no, we may be attempting to pick up a couple more at the auction where he came from this year, possibly pivot away from the goats that are a little bit more of a pain in the ass, and perhaps have several more. Now, it's a 2-year timeline, and like everything else I've butchered, it will probably involve me trying to get the animal as close to where I want to finish the butchering and hoisting it up a tree. But we do not have a tractor, so if I'm moving this cow, it's under his own power or in pieces. So when that 2-year mark comes around, I will either have acquired a trailer to get him to somebody else to do the butchering, or I will be attempting the biggest butchering project of my life. But, it's all about learning new things and iterating the process.
And then we'll hear the novel about it later.
yeah, that is the best.
During the winter, it is a meat locker. Did I tell you the story about how my children ate squirrels? I didn't think so.
This is probably a good start for later.
I have exactly a minute, which is probably just about right. I had a pig in the tree, December 23rd, because the following morning, when we went out there to finish processing the pig, because it had chilled all night, my daughter looked up in the tree where the pig was hanging, and she said, "Dad, is that squirrel eating our pig?" And there was a squirrel that was like, "This tastes delicious," and was getting pieces from the inside of the pig to nibble on. My daughter, who Bella would have been 8 or 9 at the time, right? Very peaceful, kind child. "You should shoot him, Dad." Well, geez, Belle, if I do that, we should probably eat him. "I will." Okay, let's go ask Mom. So we went and asked Mom, and Mom was like, "You're going to eat that?" And Bella was like, "Yeah." I said, "Okay," because Mom said okay. So we went and got the 22, which you don't need because the pig was already dead, right? But I went and got the 22, and the squirrel's taking his time. This is the beginning of my talk. I told you, right? It's never enough time. So I shoot the squirrel out of the tree. Boom. Bella gets a lesson in cleaning the squirrel. We get delayed in butchering the pig or processing the pig the rest of the way. Wouldn't you know, there's another squirrel later. And she goes, Dad, what's Marcus having for dinner tonight? So don't you know, okay, now we've got two, right? They're skinned. When you skin it, the only way you could tell it was a squirrel is because there's a little patch of velvet on all four of their paws. So I've got a little glass 9x9 with two supine, squirrel carcasses in it, and instructions from my wife on how they need to be processed so that the children can eat them, or to cook so that they can be eaten, because I still have a pig to part. So yes, long story short, they ate it with barbecue sauce. They said it was great. My son would just as soon never eat them again. But
I'll tell you how I got my girls to eat squirrel. They cried.
thank you for coming. My time is up. And
If you want more from Professor Leos, join Telegram and Discord.
yes, I'm on Telegram, I'm on Discord. Every place I am Leos Mike, so you can always find me. And if you have any questions, follow up or otherwise, you can't get me to stop talking once I
Make sure
start.
to leave 1 hour.
There you go.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you.